Chambers. We got a great show for you this afternoon. Please stay tuned. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Dr. Tamika Manning alongside Dr. April Gibbons, psychotherapist. And of course, we have a special guest today. Can't wait to dive in and learn more about this subject, human trafficking. I've heard it in the last several years. There's so much to learn about it. I started doing a little research myself. You got caught up in this. I want to know more about it. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
How did this happen to you? Such a beautiful woman. I saw your picture and I was like, wow, she's gorgeous. You've recently written a book about it. Tell us, how did you actually get caught up into human trafficking?
Yes. And so just before I say that and let you guys know how this all began, I have to underscore it with the reality that human trafficking is not a new subject. When you're talking about people being exploited, and for whether it be labor purposes or sexual purposes by the means of force, fraud, or coercion, this is not a new topic, especially for the African American. And so I just have to underscore that. Unfortunately, in the early 90s, I was a teenager. I was 17 years of age. I had a very tumultuous home life. Okay. My father was ex-military. My father was ex-military, and he was from the south side of Chicago, who escaped a very bad home life himself just to go in to serve 2 tours in Vietnam in the United States Air Force. My mother, on the other hand, and so my dad, very slick, savvy man back then, had a lot of game, and he pulled my mother. My mother was from the other side of the tracks, grew up in somewhat a socialite home, and was introduced to a very traumatic marriage. Okay, so for 21 years, at the time I was a teenager, they had been married 21 years. And this kind of set the stage. With my father going to 2 tours in Vietnam, they didn't talk about PTSD a lot back then, but he was suffering from that. He was also an alcoholic. These were coping mechanisms. He was also a drug addict. And so my home life was filled with domestic violence, right? And so when you're looking at the posterity of abuse and the way that abuse is passed down generationally, this is the situation that I was in. And so I made a decision, a very serious decision, to leave home. And so just a little bit more background really quick. My father had isolated my mother away from her family. We didn't grow up with cousins, aunts, uncles, and that whole normal thing. We didn't go to family reunions. The type of abuse that he enacted upon my mother was very severe, including torture and things of that nature. So, but that's another story. But that's the backdrop, right? And so when I left home at 16, and I had thought about this for many, many years at that point, because I saw a lot. I saw too much. And I felt like, you know what, this is just not what I want for my life, right? And I felt that even at the age of 16. And so basically got into an altercation with my father one day. He did threaten to kill me. He was going through withdrawal. And I've researched that, and it's a very serious thing. But at 16, I didn't know what in the world was going on. Mm-hmm. And he went to attack me, and my mother jumped in between. I literally ran out of the house and to some neighbors who called the police. They carted him off to jail. 2 weeks later, I was on the streets. And I basically saved up my money from 2 part-time jobs that I worked at. And I worked 2 part-time jobs, and I was a contributing writer at the Dallas Weekly newspaper here in the DFW area. And so I left all of that to jump on a Greyhound bus. I bought that $119 ticket and back up just a little bit, put a pin in that because I went to a prom of a friend of mine in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which we lived at before Dallas. And on that flight, I met a gentleman who had no business, number one, giving me his number at 27 years of age, and I was 16, but he did. And with me having, just that gap of a strong family foundation with my father specifically, I developed a friendship with this gentleman. And if you can call him that. But that friendship led to him saying, after I kind of let him know I was coming from a bad situation, I needed help. I was looking for an out. I was also looking for a father figure. I was looking for a lot of things back then. And he said, hey, if you feel like you need to get away, why don't you come with me to Atlanta? And so I did make this decision to follow him. He, however, was not my trafficker. We had a very bad couple of weeks that I lived there, but he did take me to a nightclub. And my story is riddled with a lot of issues here. But
so it looks like the story begins with trauma. And so
yes.
Dr. April, she is a psychotherapist, and of course she counsels weekly with these types of situations. So would you say your beginning was so deep rooted in that it pretty much led to the out, and this is the path that you took to get there? Dr. April, I know you probably want to intervene, and you see this on a regular, but have you seen anyone or have you counseled anyone that's been trafficked?
Well, not currently. No, I haven't. Of course, I've read the literature and, have seen it just like everyone else, but I don't currently have someone that actually has been trafficking. However, I do have, several who have been, abused by parents and emotionally, mentally, physically, and things like that. So I can definitely understand how being in a situation, being young, and you're seeing this every day with your dad, and then to have him threaten you, make you feel like, hey, I need to get away.
Right, right. And so when I moved to Atlanta after meeting this gentleman in a club, I quickly left the place where I was. And he said, you know what? It was the same scenario. You need a place to stay. I can find you a place to stay. Just so happens he worked for a very famous record producer who to this day is very famous, who said that if I wanted to live in safety and I wanted my needs taken care of, then I needed to be able to provide these groups with services. And so these were groups that he was producing. And so I lived with them at 16 years of age. I lived with 6 guys who were entertainers. And this is where it all began. And so I was oftentimes at the after parties. I did meet a lot of celebrities who I can't really talk about what the situation was because it was terrible. But many of them were married, people that you would know and remember and relate to because you've seen them all of your lives. And so ultimately, I was you can call it a sex slave for that matter, because nobody was holding a gun to my head, but they were providing me with what I thought was safety. And it was very warped in the way that I felt that way, but I was initiated, if you will, and that came in the form, and I'm sorry, but it came in the form of a gang rape. I was initiated, and a lot of fear took place because I was threatened by one of the group entourage. He was security, and he said, if you let any of this out, I will kill you personally. And so, there's a lot that happened within the time that I was there, which was approximately a year, give or take. And basically, I went from handler to handler. I ended up leaving them and I went to another handler, a female handler. And after that, I broke away from that situation just to find myself a stripper because I had a very low self-esteem. I felt like there wasn't much I can do outside of, I knew I had a body. I knew I was beautiful. I knew that people wanted my services, and I knew that I could make money. I didn't want to pimp. I didn't want to be underneath someone's power, right? People in my power, pimp. I didn't want that. I wanted to kind of run my own enterprise. And so it just degraded me. And the things that I was involved in left me with a lot of battle scars. and the battle scars were in the form of mental illness. And so I did have a nervous breakdown after about 6 years of living that type of lifestyle. I had a nervous breakdown. I was 23 years of age. And I was in Elizabeth Emergency Care Unit. I will never forget. And that's why I did write this book, to talk about that experience, because I really wanted to take people into the mind of a teenager who would make these type of dangerous decisions in order to find a sense of normalcy. And it's like you go from desiring normalcy to being caught up. But when I look at and I research human trafficking a lot, it was not called that back then. In 92, I would have been considered a juvenile delinquent. I would have been picked up for truancy. I would have been thrown in the juvenile justice system. And who knows what my life would be like right now. I would have a record, right, as being a juvenile prostitute. But interestingly enough, if we fast forward to today, according to the FBI, about 57% of all arrests made with juvenile prostitution are made with Black children. And so I think that that's very, being Black History Month, this is something that we might need to highlight, which we're doing right now. But this is a very serious matter in our communities, and not to be an alarmist, but this is my story, and it is quickly snowballing. You're talking about a criminal industry or a criminal enterprise that is one of the fastest growing worldwide. And so this is a huge issue that we really need to know. You talk about the pandemic and you think, how in the world can this thing continue to persist and gain all this gusto in a pandemic? Because you have the internet. And so you have the issue of child pornography. Many times when people are watching pornography, they're watching people in situations where they do not want to be there. So I can go on, but there's a lot that happened. And I think one of the biggest thing one of the things I researched, which I have so much respect for you guys. I'm very into understanding what happened to me, right? And so what I learned these few days, there's something called the allostatic load, right? And so that's basically the wear and tear on the body from chronic stress. And that's basically what led me to that diagnosis of bipolar disorder. There was just an overwhelming traumatic stress response in my body. And so, when you talk about these things, if you go forward to the life that I tried to create after exiting that lifestyle, you talk about a lot of shame, a lot of secrecy, a lot of stigma. But then you talk about, I want to get mental health situations in order, but I'm afraid to, because maybe that labels me as crazy. And so I've been through enough. I don't want another label. So, I went for years and years, y'all, without the proper health care. And so now, that I would say in the past 5 years, I woke up and said, hold up, this is hurting me more than anybody else. So I felt like, number one, it's time to speak up and express to other people, this is what I experienced, but also for the purpose of letting them know about these different issues, that with the traumatic experiences that come from my story, with the human trafficking aspect, it's really important for us to take care of this piece of us. We have to take care of our minds. The fact that I'm even here is a miracle, because the suicidal ideation, the homicidal ideation, all the things that I felt when I was in that lifestyle, they haunted me. And I needed to get psychotherapy. I needed to get, what's that? The therapy where you're learning the cognitive ways of handling.
CBT.
Yes, I was looking for that.
Yeah,
so I'm coming up. But yes.
So when did you start to seek therapy, or are you currently in therapy?
So when did I start to seek therapy? It was not what I wanted to do, but when I had a nervous breakdown in 97, I was taken by the police to a psych ward, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's where I received my diagnosis. In 97, I went through a little therapy, but I felt like, again, I didn't want anything to do with that. That meant I was broken. That meant, I was all of these different things. So when I went throughout the years and began to realize that this could possibly help me, I kind of dated therapy. I kind of went here and went there and said, I don't know. I reevaluated. But when I got serious about my mental health, I would say that was in the past 5 years. And I'm talking about going to therapy on an outpatient basis, the intensive outpatient therapy. But the other thing that happened to me throughout the years, which kind of reminded me that maybe I need to take this seriously, is the numerous mental institutions that I frequented. You
Mm.
know, it was one of those things that it would happen occasionally. I would have a breakdown because I was not taking medication because I didn't want anything to do with that. But now you can't catch me at about 9 p.m. without popping a couple pills and saying, look,
Okay.
this is helping me. I'm going to do it because it is helping me to live a more abundant life. You know,
And
I
you're
no
also
longer have
going
to
to,
live confined, right?
yeah, and
Right.
speaking of help, you're also going to help so many young girls. I'm seeing
Mhm.
now that the largest number of traffickers are the ages, girls between the ages of, or women between the ages of 19 and 33. I'm an administrator at a high school. And
Mhm.
so I see a lot of different situations, and I can actually see you being able to go into institutions like
Yeah.
schools and other places, making this more known and talking about it so that other people won't fall into this same path.
Right.
What are you doing now to reach young girls? Are you speaking at churches? Where are you
Mhm.
going? What are you doing?
Exactly what you mentioned. So I've spoken within a couple of school districts. I've also received training as a human trafficking workshops facilitator through an organization called Love 146, who does exactly what you mentioned. And so I consider myself on the advocacy side right now. I personally have an initiative that is in the process of transforming from an initiative to a 501c3 called Fast Forward, which is fighting against sex trafficking. And so I speak everywhere that there is an opportunity. I do speak in churches. Spoken in corporate America, and that list is growing now. I'm doing more virtual events. So virtual, in person, everywhere that anyone will hear me, because especially when you're talking about this issue happened to me as a child. And so children are the most vulnerable. Immigrant families are very vulnerable.
These
So
statistics, yes.
it happens to be those who are marginalized who have the worst issues with this. And that's not to say that there are not some exclusive escort services that are doing the same
Mm.
thing privately. It just looks more dressed up, right?
Right.
It looks better, but the women are still bound. The men are still bound. This also is not, I mean, if we would dispel a myth, it's not just happening to females. Even though there's an overwhelming proportion of women being trafficked, there are just as many children that are boys and grown men who are being trafficked as well. And so, you know, it's a big issue. It's a big issue.
Mhm.
Well, thank you for agreeing to come on and to talk more about it. Since we are a show that focuses more on mental health, that's another outcry. I mean, I saw here that that
Mm.
was actually one of the reasons that a lot of people actually end up being trafficked at some point. So you said you kind of dance with therapy a little bit. But what
Mhm.
would you say to someone who says, "No, I am not crazy, but I do need therapy. I do need someone to push me in that arena so that I can get better." That's why Dr. April is here. What would you say to someone?
First of all, I would say, Dr. April, thank you, because when it comes to our community, we need to see us because we feel there are things that we experience uniquely that does need to be addressed by us. However, there are many very skilled and educated counselors who are trained to be able to deal with the human condition, right? And so I would say embrace. Don't do what I did. I dated, you know, I speed dated counseling. Go ahead and embrace counseling, because just think of it like this: if you have a car, aren't you going to take it in for maintenance?
Right.
If you have broken a leg, aren't you going to get a cast? And so, if your mind has been injured, don't you need someone who can help you heal it? Right. And so, I would say get the help that you need. And it's a very big issue as well, you know, but I believe that the stigma is slowly but surely lifting around and surrounding mental health and surrounding mental health in the African American community. And so it's very important to seek out the professionals. And so, you know, there's issues that are attached to that, but ultimately I would say seek out the help. and there are hotlines that are available. There are many, if you would just kind of type in Google and look for the healthcare professionals that help with mental health, then you can get a little bit of direction. If you have insurance, you can talk with your insurance company about what options are there for your behavioral health. If you do not have insurance, you have like, is it MHMR?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. You have organizations that will, for no cost, be able to provide you with the counseling that you need. But I would go even a step further. There are multiple psychotherapists and psychiatrists and mental health professionals that have podcasts, that have books out. I would just inundate myself with information, because then what you're going to find out is you're not alone. You are not alone. You do not have to suffer suicidal thoughts alone. You do not have to endure urges to seek revenge and entertain homicidal thoughts. You don't have to be in that mental chamber of torture. There is help. There is medication. I know people have different feelings about that. I did. I didn't want to take anything. I don't even like to take Tylenol. But what I began to realize as I became educated about my condition is that was going to help me to live a life where, I'm not constantly experiencing panic attacks, and I'm not going as frequently inpatient. That's huge for my life. I have three children. I have a husband. It's huge for my life and betters the quality or makes the quality of my life better when I have the help. And
So,
so, yes.
Keeya, what was your breaking point? Because you talked about being involved in this horrific ring for 6 years, and you had all these different emotions. You thought about suicide. What was the actual breaking point? What brought you to the point of you knowing that I have to make a change?
It was not, I would say, an idea that I actively sought out. I knew things needed to change. I knew that I didn't want to continue to live that way. But honestly, it was the mental health breakdown that I had. When I had the nervous breakdown, it was my sign to pump the brakes and reset my life, my entire life. And so, it could be viewed as, oh, that was such a terrible moment. But really, it was terrible, but it was not as terrible as enduring what I did. It was my breaking point. And I had at that point now an opportunity to leave the state. I reached out to my brother. I got the mental health services that I needed at the time. I was removed from the situation and able to see clear. You cannot heal in the environment you are being injured. You just can't.
It's
And
true.
so, yes.
I
I
love that.
commend you. I commend you so much for being able to triumph, from tragedy. So that's amazing. And now being able to turn that into, this platform that you have and writing the book. So tell us a little summary about the book.
Yes, well, I mean, the book really talks about the 16-year-old me to 23-year-old me. So this is me in the upswing of this whole environment, going through what I was going through. And like I said, I try to walk you through the decision-making process. Why would I make all of these different bold decisions that were dangerous? And so I walk people through that. And then I also walk them through, what did it look like for me to exit, right? So what did it look like? I give them a inside view of a psych ward, a doctor-patient relationship. I give them an inside view of what does it look like in someone's mind when they have a Christ complex. Because I had a couple of things to happen in there. And the wonderful thing, and I say wonderful because I'm able to give people a window into that, I want them to see that even with all of that happening, I was able to come out of it, right? And so I went from making anywhere from about $1,500 a week as a young lady. That's a good amount of money, right? Tax-free, to working at Wendy's when I came out of everything for $89 a week. But what did I have when I was making $89 a week? My self-respect, my safety. So I kind of expressed that to people, that this was my journey. These were the pitfalls, but here's the hope. right? Here's the hope.
Okay.
And so the book is available. It's 1000 Elsewhere, a true survivor story. You put my first and last name in Amazon, and it'll take you to it. And yes, it's really
Okay.
a riveting story. It's not a happy topic, but it is a topic that needs to be highlighted. And again, I thank you for bringing me on your platform, because we need to talk about it more, especially within our communities, because we know anything that affects us, it just has a unique way of touching us,
Mhm.
right? Based
Right.
upon so many different factors. But hold on, this is what the book looks like. So when you go to
Okay.
Amazon, if it doesn't look like that, don't click on it.
I love it. I love it. For those of us who have a relationship and are spiritual, at those moments, did you find or feel like God was present with you and He brought you through the those moments, those harsh moments, those hard moments, where you could have been killed?
I'm so glad that you asked me that question, because we grew up in church. Even with my father beating my mother under the refrigerator, we went to church all the time. We never missed a beat. And so
Mhm.
I did have a foundation of having a relationship with God, right? And I left that foundation when I left home for the only reason that I left it is because I felt like, well, God, if this could happen to me, maybe this is for someone else, but maybe, you don't love me so much or whatever. But what I came to recognize, and when I did come back to Dallas and started walking through my healing process, I reconnected with my childhood faith, which is Christian. I'm currently a pastor's wife, and so I have a huge
Okay.
bias when it comes down to the power of God and
Yes.
how He can bring you through such a terrible situation and then
Mhm.
redeem it. I'm a
Right.
redemption story. Okay, I'm what victory looks like, period. That's what I am. And that's because I had a God who was kind enough to pull me out of a situation. And then some people say, well, hold up, but this God is so kind. Why did you go through that? Here's my theory on that. When you endure hardship, what it does is it gives you a capacity. And when you come out of that
Mhm.
hardship, now you can relate to people who have experienced certain hardships that look like yours. And now you can pull them out. So now you are in
Mhm.
position to be a deliverer. You are if Sojourner Truth did not go through slavery, do you think that she would be able to have led so many people to freedom? No, she had a heartbeat for those who were enslaved, because she too herself was enslaved.
I
And
love
so, because I was enslaved in human trafficking, I owe it to God. I owe it to my ancestors. I owe it to every girl out there and every boy out there who does not have a voice. I'm going to tell you, I'm what victory looks like, and it could be your story too. There's help out there for you.
Well, my prayer is that you have an opportunity to continue to tell your story and to help young girls and young boys, men and women who get caught up in human trafficking. I know Dr. April, of course, can wrap this all up for us when we're talking about mental health and the mental implications of something so severe, because it is so severe. And I can't imagine being a
Yeah.
teenager and going through what you've been through. But thank God you made it through that, Dr. April.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I commend you, Keeya, and I definitely think, others who are out there dealing with something like this definitely need to seek therapy. We are trained to walk you through how to overcome this with different coping skills and things that you can do. So I definitely think that's a plus. And like you said, it's definitely good to get all the research and all the help that you can by listening to podcasts from professionals and
Yes.
searching these things out. Self-help books are amazing, by professionals. It's a lot of people that have wrote, a lot of therapists have wrote really awesome books. So that's definitely a start until, you can get some help in person. So I think that's amazing.
Absolutely.
All right. So we
Absolutely.
encourage you guys to go out there, get the book Keeya Vawar, the author of 1000 Elsewhere, a true survivor story. And we will wrap up, of course. We definitely appreciate you coming on and spending
Mhm.
a part of your Sunday afternoon with us. Dr. April, we will end with a positive affirmation. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yes. So the affirmation for today is I am worthy of love just the way I am. You are not what happened to you.
Not what happened to you. That resonates with me. Thank you guys. Thank you all for joining us as well. Be sure to go out to our YouTube page and follow us. Reels that you guys can see, and you'll be able to follow us. We talk about everything from relationships to of course the subject that we have on today. Again, Keeya Vawar, we appreciate you. Thank you all for joining us as well.